Before sunrise, Vatican City feels like a held breath. The air is cool, still, almost expectant, as if the centuries themselves are pausing to see what the new day will reveal. In the half-light, St. Peter's Square looks like a vast stone ocean, its colonnades curved like open arms, its obelisk rising like a needle stitching together sky and earth. And then, just as the first hint of dawn bruises the horizon, the great facade of St. Peter's Basilica begins to glow. One column, then another. One sculpted apostle, then the next. A slow illumination that feels less like the sun rising and more like history waking up. But it's the dome that steals the breath. Michelangelo's dome, a shape so massive, so impossibly balanced, that it dominates the skyline even in silhouette. As the light sharpens, its ribs gleam like the spokes of a celestial wheel. The closer you stand, the more the dome feels alive, an architectural heartbeat that pulses through the entire basilica and radiates into the square. And beneath that dome, hidden for now in morning shadow, lies one of the most ambitious, complicated, and fiercely contested building projects humanity has ever attempted. The story of St. Peter's Basilica is not peaceful. It is not linear. It is not simple. It is drama layered in stone. It begins in the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine ordered a church built over what Christians of the era believed, correctly, to be the burial site of St. Peter. That first basilica stood for more than 1,000 years. Pilgrims traveled from across continents to touch its worn columns and kneel before its relics. But time is merciless. By the late 1400s, the ancient structure was leaning, cracking, sagging under the weight of centuries. The roof had holes. The floor had shifted. Entire walls needed reinforcement. It was sacred, yes, but it was dying. And that meant a choice had to be made. Preserve the past or rebuild for the future. Pope Julius II chose the future, and he chose it with a scale of ambition the world had never seen. He wanted a basilica worthy of the apostle buried beneath it. A basilica that would anchor the Catholic world. A basilica that would outlive every king and empire surrounding it. And so, in 1506, he ordered something unprecedented, tear down the old structure and replace it with the largest church on earth. The plan was bold, controversial, dangerous, and breathtaking. The first architect, Donato Bramante, envisioned a grand central plan church crowned with a dome larger than any ever built. His design was geometric perfection, clean, powerful, majestic. But Bramante's vision had a problem. It required demolishing much of the old basilica before the new one was ready. And when Bramante died in 1514, only fragments of the new structure were complete. The project stalled, money ran low, political factions clashed, artists argued. Decade after decade, the basilica seemed cursed by its own ambition. Then Michelangelo stepped in. He was 71. He didn't want the job. He took it anyway. Unlike Bramante, Michelangelo didn't just design the dome. He wrestled with it, fought it, shaped it like a sculptor battles marble. His dome was not a copy of the Pantheon. It was not a duplicate of Florence Cathedral. It was something new, a structure that combined the solidity of ancient engineering with the drama of Renaissance vision. He thickened the walls, redesigned the drum, refined the silhouette, and slowly the basilica took form. But he never lived to see it finished. The dome would rise another 40 years after Michelangelo's death, completed in the late 1500s under the watch of Giacomo della Porta and Domenico Fontana. They followed Michelangelo's drawings with reverence, but added their own refinements, steeper curves, sharper lines, a profile that lifted the dome into something more assertive, more triumphant. When the last stone was set in 1590, the dome became one of the tallest structures in Europe. Its shadow stretched across the city like a blessing or a warning. Inside, the basilica grew into a world of its own. Stepping across the threshold feels like stepping into a lung the size of a universe. The interior expands in every direction, columns rising like marble trees, mosaics glowing with gold, sculptures emerging from shadow with impossible delicacy. The scale distorts everything. What looks like a small medallion from the entrance is larger than a car. What seems like a modest statue from across the nave towers more than 2 stories tall. The letters around the base of the dome read like ordinary script, until you realize each one is 6 feet high. Bernini's baldachin rises from the floor like an enormous bronze vortex, twisting columns, gilded details, a canopy so vast it feels like a storm frozen in midair. Beneath it lies the high altar. Beneath that altar lies the tomb of St. Peter, and under that tomb lies the truth that shaped the entire basilica. Because this church, every slab of marble, every gilded star, every carved angel, was built to guard a fisherman's grave. Excavations conducted between the 1940s and 1960s confirmed what tradition had claimed for centuries. Beneath the basilica lies a Roman necropolis, and among the graves is a tomb covered with ancient graffiti naming Peter. The church wasn't built on symbolism. It was built on archaeology. But the tension in the story doesn't come from faith. It comes from power. Because St. Peter's Basilica was not built quietly. It was built through conflict, through arguments, through financial strain, through political upheaval. The raising of funds, including the sale of indulgences, became one of the sparks that ignited the Protestant Reformation. Popes changed. Plans changed. Architects came and went. The basilica outlived wars, revolutions, scandals, plagues, dictators, and empires. Its completion in 1626 was less a moment of triumph than a moment of relief. And yet, despite all this turmoil, the basilica stands today as one of the most harmonious structures on Earth. Walk toward the dome, and the world rearranges itself around you. The marble floor becomes a map of centuries. Sunlight floods through clerestory windows in diagonal beams that turn dust motes into constellations. Galleries appear above you like floating balconies. Pilgrims walk with slow, reverent steps, their voices hushed as if the air itself has grown sacred. Everything, from the curve of every arch to the gold on every mosaic, is designed to raise your eyes, your breath, your spirit upward. But the deeper truth comes from what the basilica hides, not what it shows. In the crypt below, past centuries-old frescoes and tombs carved in marble, lies the necropolis, narrow corridors lined with ancient burial chambers lit only by soft lamps. The air is cool and still. The walls carry Latin inscriptions faded by time. And at the center is the modest, stone-covered grave believed to hold the remains of Peter. Not a grand sarcophagus, not a golden reliquary, just a burial site from the 1st century, preserved because generations refused to let it be forgotten. The most powerful basilica in the world is built on simplicity. And here comes the twist, the one that transforms the story. St. Peter's Basilica was never meant to be admired. It was meant to disappear. Not physically, not architecturally, but spiritually. When you stand inside its walls, the goal is not for you to see the basilica. The goal is for you to feel what the basilica is pointing toward. Michelangelo didn't design the dome to show off engineering. He designed it to lift the human gaze upward, toward something beyond human hands. Bernini didn't craft the colonnades to impress. He made them to embrace. Every statue, every curve, every beam of light exists not to glorify the building, but to guide the visitor through an emotional transformation. The basilica is a bridge disguised as a monument, a passageway from human scale to cosmic scale, from ground to sky, from mortality to meaning. The closer you look, the more this becomes undeniable. St. Peter's is not simply a masterpiece of architecture. It is a psychological machine built to awaken awe, humility, wonder, and silence. And that is the real revelation. The basilica doesn't want to be the destination. It wants to be the launching point. When you walk back out into St. Peter's Square at dusk, everything you saw inside seems to echo behind your ribs. The sky over the dome deepens into a bruised purple. The square fills with shadows. Tourists whisper without knowing why. The facade glows like warm stone lit from within. The dome becomes a silhouette, vast, calm, timeless. And you realize the twist that architects spent centuries embedding into this monument. St. Peter's Basilica was built to make you look inward by making you look upward. It's not just a church. It's a reminder carved in stone that humanity's greatest works are really mirrors held to the soul.